The winter of 1893 clamped down on the Bitterroot Range like a fist that wouldn't let go. Wind scoured the ridges, howling through the pines with a voice as old as the mountains, carrying knives of ice in every gust. Snow had fallen for weeks without pause, filling gullies, bending trees low under its weight, and swallowing trails until the world looked like a blank sheet of white. Even the rivers had stilled, locked in silence beneath their frozen armor. Out here, a man's breath turned to crystals before it reached the ground, and a woman had no chance at all if she wasn't properly clothed, fed, and sheltered. That's why he almost didn't believe his eyes when he saw it, something half hidden under the drift at the base of a pine. At first he thought it was another branch torn down by the storm, but the shape was wrong, softer, still, almost human. He pulled his horse to a stop, squinting through the swirl of snowflakes. The wind caught the edge of a ragged shawl, flapping weakly, and his heart gave a jolt. It wasn't a branch. It was a woman. Her body was nearly swallowed by the snowbank, as if the storm had tried to bury her alive. One arm stuck out, pale against the dark pines, fingers stiff as ice. The other was pinned beneath her, tangled in the half-frozen earth. The mountain man swung down from his saddle without thinking. His boots sank deep, the cold biting straight through the leather, but he didn't care. He crouched at her side and brushed the powder from her face. Her lips were blue, her eyes closed. But when he pressed his ear near her mouth, he thought, no, he knew. He heard the faintest whisper of breath. Alive. Barely. Hold on, he muttered, already tearing at the crust of snow around her with his hands. Don't you quit on me now. The storm raged overhead, but he dug faster, each handful of snow burning his fingers raw. The longer she lay here, too, the closer death crept. And he wasn't about to let the wilderness claim her. The mountain man's hands worked furiously, scraping through layers of packed ice and powder until her body loosened from the frozen clutch of the drift. She was light, too light, as he lifted her, her frame collapsing limply against his chest. Her clothes were little more than torn calico and a faded shawl, stiff with frost, offering no defense against the mountain's wrath. Her head lolled to one side, lashes clumped with ice. She didn't stir, not even when his rough arms carried her clear of the snow. He pressed 2 fingers to her neck, holding his breath until he felt it, a faint, faltering beat. Alive, but slipping fast. "Who left you here?" he whispered, his voice raw in the storm. "And why?" The wind gave no answer. The woods stood silent except for the hiss of snow driving against the branches. He knew he couldn't linger. Cold like this stole minutes, not hours. His horse stamped and snorted nearby, restless, sensing the danger of stillness in such bitter air. He glanced at the saddle. But traveling now, with her this weak, this near to death, was impossible. No, they wouldn't make it to his cabin alive. He had to build fire. Here. Now. He carried her to the thick base of a pine, where the wind was broken by the tree's heavy arms. He set her gently against the trunk, brushed ice from her face, and stripped off his own fur-lined coat, wrapping it around her shivering body. She barely filled the space inside it, swallowed up by his warmth. Her lips moved faintly, but no sound came. "Save your strength," he muttered. "I'll get you warm." He dropped to his knees, pulling the hatchet from his belt. His hands, though numb, worked with practiced speed, splitting kindling from a dead branch, striking steel to flint. Sparks leapt, caught in the dry curls of bark, and he bent low, shielding it with his body as he coaxed the flame to life. The fire crackled, spreading heat in greedy tongues. He fed it steadily, building it high, pushing it to fight the storm. When he turned back to her, he saw a flicker, the faintest tremor in her chest as she drew a deeper breath. The warmth was reaching her. Still, her skin was like marble beneath his touch. He leaned closer, his voice low but steady. "You hear me, girl? You're not going to die out here, not while I've got fire in my hands." And for the first time since finding her, he thought he saw her lashes twitch. The fire clawed back a circle of warmth against the storm, the flames casting orange light across the snow. The mountain man sat close, his broad shoulders hunched, watching the girl with the sharp focus of a man who had nursed life out of winter's jaws before. Her breath rattled faintly, shallow but steadier than before. He reached down, pulling her closer to the blaze, wrapping the heavy coat tighter around her frame. For a long while, he only listened, to the popping wood, the wind howling like some wild beast beyond their small refuge, and the fragile rhythm of her breathing. Each rise and fall of her chest was a victory. Then slowly, her lips moved again. This time a whisper broke free, hoarse, broken, but real. "Please." His head snapped toward her, leaning low. "Easy now. You're safe." Her eyes fluttered, lids heavy with frost. For a moment she seemed not to know if he was real or another cruel dream the cold had conjured. "They left me." The words were ragged, torn out of her like they hurt. "Said I wasn't worth the food. Not worth the fire." A muscle jumped in his jaw. He had seen hard men do cruel things to survive winters like this, but to leave someone buried in the snow, to die alone, that was something worse. "Not worth the fire," he muttered, staring into the blaze. Well, they were wrong. Her hand twitched, small and trembling beneath the folds of his coat. Without thinking, he covered it with his own, rough and scarred, but warm. "You'll keep your fire now," he said, low, and certain. "So long as I draw breath, you will." Her eyes closed again, surrendering to exhaustion, but he saw the faintest shadow of relief pass across her face. The mountain man leaned back against the tree, feeding the flames, his gaze scanning the snow-blind woods beyond. Somewhere out there, people had chosen to abandon her, people he intended to find, whether she asked him to or not. But for now, the fight was here, keeping her alive. He piled more wood onto the fire, letting it roar higher, as though daring the storm itself to take her. The storm eased little by little, though the wind still whipped the trees and moaned through the pines. The mountain man knew he couldn't keep her there much longer. A fire in the woods was only a borrowed reprieve. Without walls, without a roof, the cold would claim her before dawn. He glanced at her again. She was breathing steadier now, her face less grey beneath the soot-stained glow of the fire. But every rise of her chest looked like a battle won. She needed real shelter, his cabin, a half-day's trek through snow that could swallow a man whole. His mind weighed the risks. Leave her here, and she wouldn't live till morning. Carry her through the storm, and the land itself might try to take them both. The decision was no decision at all. He'd carried heavier burdens through worse. Kneeling, he pulled the coat tighter around her and slid his arms beneath her, lifting her against his chest. She was light as dry sticks, her head lolling against his shoulder. He could feel the faintest warmth of her breath on his neck. The fire hissed as he kicked snow over it, smothering the flames. The woods plunged back into blackness, save for the white glare of the snow and the faint lantern glow of the sky above. He started forward, each step breaking through drifts that clutched at his legs. The girl stirred faintly in his arm. "So, where are you taking me?" "To where the cold can't touch you," he said, his voice gruff but steady. Her fingers curled weakly into the fabric of his coat, like she was trying to anchor herself to him. She whispered something else, but the storm swallowed it, and he pressed on, jaw set against the wind. The mountains loomed silent and endless around them, and for a long time it was only the crunch of his boots and the sound of her shallow breathing. But the mountain man's resolve never faltered. The cabin lay ahead, the fire, the safety, and he would carry her there, even if it meant breaking himself against the storm. The trail was near invisible, swallowed by snow and shadow, but the mountain man's boots found it by memory more than sight. He had walked these ridges for years, carved his life against the grain of the land, and the way back to his cabin lived in his bones. Still, the storm pressed against him like a wall, the drifts climbed to his knees, the wind cut sideways into his face, and the weight of the girl in his arms grew heavier with each step. Her breath was warm against his chest, faint but steady, and that was enough to keep him moving. Halfway down the slope, a pine cracked in the gale and toppled, its weight shaking the ground. He froze, turning his body to shield her as branches crashed into the snow a dozen yards away. For a long moment, the forest held its breath, and then the wind picked up again, howling through the wreckage. He muttered under his breath, words meant more for himself than her. Not tonight. You're not taking her tonight. By the time he reached the creek bed, his legs burned like fire. The stream had frozen solid days ago, a ribbon of white stone under the snow, and he followed it as though it were a guiding line cut through the wilderness. The girl stirred, her voice ragged. Why did you save me? He didn't answer right away. He shifted her higher in his arms and kept walking, breath steaming in the night. At last he said, low and rough, because someone should have, and no one else did. The cabin's outline rose out of the storm at last, a squat shape half buried in snow, smoke long gone from its chimney. Relief broke over him, sharp as the cold. He stumbled up the steps, kicked the door open with his boot, and carried her inside. The dark cabin smelled of pine pitch and old ash. He laid her gently on the bunk against the wall, then moved quick, striking flint, coaxing sparks, feeding dry kindling until flames licked up into the hearth. The glow spread, chasing shadows, painting the cabin gold. She lay watching him, her eyes half open, fragile as glass, yet stubborn as the embers beginning to burn. Rest now, he told her, his voice softer than it had been in years. The fire'll do the rest. For the first time since he had found her beneath the snow, she let her eyes close, and the mountain man sat watching the flames, guarding them as if guarding her very life. The storm raged through the night, battering the cabin walls with a fury that shook the shutters. But inside, the fire held steady, its glow flickering over the rough-hewn timbers and the mountain man's weathered face. He had not slept. His chair creaked each time he leaned forward to feed the flames, each time he glanced at the girl stretched out on his bunk. Her skin had lost its bluish cast, color returning in faint streaks to her cheeks. A pot simmered near the hearth, filling the cabin with the smell of broth, thin but hot enough to draw the cold out of her bones. When she stirred at last, he was ready. He knelt by her side, lifting a cup to her lips. She sipped, weak but willing, and after a long silence she spoke, her voice a rasp, but steadier than before. They wanted me gone. He didn't push. Not yet. He only held her gaze, waiting. Her eyes glistened in the firelight, a reflection of flame and fear. Said I was a burden, said there wasn't enough food, so they dragged me out, left me in the drift. Figured the snow would finish what they started. The mountain man's jaw tightened. He knew the winters could drive men to cruelty, knew hunger twisted minds. But to cast someone aside, leave them to die in the dark, that was more than desperation. That was a choice. You're not gone, he said at last, voice low as gravel. And as long as I'm here, you won't be. She blinked hard, fighting tears that the cold had denied her out in the snow. Her fingers curled around the blanket, trembling less now, her breath steadier. The fire popped, throwing sparks. He set the cup aside, leaned back on his heels, and watched her carefully, as if testing whether the strength she showed was real or just a flicker. After a long while, her eyes closed again, not from weakness this time, but from the weight of exhaustion that healing demanded. The mountain man rose, fed more wood to the fire, and turned toward the frost-furred window. Somewhere out in the storm were the ones who had left her to die. He didn't know their names, their faces, or their reasons, but he knew one thing with certainty. The next time he crossed their path, they'd answer for it. By morning, the storm had broken. The sky hung heavy with grey, clouds dragging slow across the ridges. The forest looked clean and untouched, every branch bowed under a fresh weight of snow, but the quiet that followed felt uneasy. The mountain man stepped outside, his boots crunching deep into the drift. Smoke rose from the cabin chimney behind him, a thin thread against the pale sky. He paused at the tree line, scanning the valley below. Tracks. Not his own. These were fresher, cutting across the slope in a hurried line. 3, maybe 4 men. Heavy boots, spurs clinking faintly in the silence. He crouched, touched the indent with his gloved hand, and frowned. The storm had only just cleared, which meant they'd been moving through the night, looking for something, or someone. Back inside, the girl stirred again. Her voice was stronger now, but fear clung to it. "They'll come back," she whispered. Almost before he shut the door. "They won't leave it be, if they know I'm still alive." Her words trailed, but the meaning was clear. He set down his rifle, leaning it against the wall within easy reach. "Let them come," he said, his tone steady, not boastful but certain. "This cabin's got 4 walls, and I've weathered worse than men." But he didn't miss the tremor in her hands as she clutched the blanket tighter. She wasn't just afraid of them finding her, she was afraid of what they'd do to anyone who stood in their way. The fire snapped, echoing the tension inside the room. He pulled a fur cloak from the peg and draped it over her shoulders, crouching to meet her eyes. "You're safe here," he told her. "I'll see to that." That afternoon, the silence of the valley broke. A raven cawed once, sharp and low, then flapped away into the grey sky. The girl stirred by the fire, her eyes widening as if she'd heard it too. The mountain man was already at the window slit. From there, he saw movement at the tree line, 3 figures dark against the snow making their way slow and deliberate up the slope, rifles slung, coats heavy with frost. They weren't hunting, they were tracking. He tightened his jaw, slipping his hand down to the rifle propped against the wall. His cabin was small but solid, logs locked tight, shutters barred. He'd built it to stand against winter, not men, but it would do. The girl's breathing quickened. "It's them," she whispered, pulling the fur tighter around her. "They'll kill us both." "Not while I've got powder and shot," he said, voice steady, though his blood was already running hotter. The first man stepped out from the trees, close enough now that he could see the frost clinging to his beard. He carried himself with the swagger of someone certain the valley belonged to him. Behind him, the others fanned wide, like wolves circling a den. The mounter, in man, eased the window open a finger's width. Cold air bled inside. He raised the rifle, sighting down the slope, but held his fire. Not yet. One of the men called out, his voice carrying eerily in the crisp air. "Ho, cabin! You got something of ours!" The girl's nails dug into the blanket, her eyes full of dread. The mountain man kept his aim steady, though his reply came low, calm, and hard enough to cut through the wind. "She ain't yours. Not now. Not ever." The 3 shadows at the tree line stilled. The silence that followed was heavier than the snow-laden sky, the kind that came before gunfire or blood. The storm had passed, but another was coming. This one carried by men, not weather. The mountain man didn't blink. His rifle stayed trained on the man in front, the leader, the one whose eyes carried more cruelty than hunger. "You best think on what you're doing," he called out, his voice carrying steady through the trees. "Snow's deep, wind sharp, and the ground here don't care who it swallows. You step wrong, this mountain'll keep you just as quick as it keeps her." The leader spat into the snow dark and hot against the white. "She's marked, paid for. Don't matter where she runs, she's coming back to us." The girl whimpered. "Please, don't let them." The mountain man's voice cut over hers, low but fierce. "She ain't going nowhere but warm. You want her back? You'll have to walk through me." The 3 men shifted, rifles unslung, boots crunching as they moved closer. The silence of the valley was broken only by the groan of ice settling on the trees. The mountain man's finger curled on the trigger. He'd killed before, wolves, bears, men too mean to be allowed another day. But this was different. This wasn't about pelts or meat or even his own hide. This was about a girl half dead in the snow, a girl who never should have been thrown there in the first place. The first shot cracked, not his, but theirs, splintering the log frame of his cabin, snow bursting from the wall. The girl shrieked and ducked. He returned fire, calm and quick, his shot tearing bark from the pine near the leader's head. The echo rolled down the valley like thunder. Another shot came, grazing the window frame, showering him with wood dust. He chambered another round, eyes sharp, body steady as a stone. The men tried to spread wide, but the snow slowed them. Every step they took was a gamble. The mountain man knew this terrain. Every dip, every hollow, every false crust that could sink a man to his waist. He whispered to the girl without looking back, "Stay low. Stay quiet." She pressed herself to the floor, hands trembling, but her eyes fixed on him like he was the last star left in a black sky. The fight had begun, and winter itself seemed to lean in, waiting to see who the mountain would claim. The storm roared harder, snow whipping sideways, the night sky pressing down as if the mountain itself were holding its breath. The leader barked, "Spread wide, flush him out." His voice cracked with cold, but there was a jagged hunger behind it. The mountain man steadied his rifle. He'd lived on these slopes long enough to know patience won fights quicker than rage. He listened to the crunch of boots in the snow, the snap of branches, the ragged breathing of men unused to the wild. The first one broke cover too quick, thinking speed would save him. The mountain man's rifle thundered once, echoing down the valley. The figure dropped face first into the drift, his body swallowed by white silence. The girl gasped, covering her mouth with shaking hands. "Two left," the mountain man muttered, his voice more to himself than her. His eyes never wavered. The second man tried circling wide, slipping behind a stand of firs, but the snow betrayed him. Too deep, too loud. The mountain man shifted, waiting. When the figure raised his rifle, he fired first. The man spun, staggered, and vanished into the powder, crimson spreading out across the snow. The leader cursed, his shadow swaying between the trees. He wasn't aiming now. He was hunting in panic. "You don't know who you're messing with," he shouted, his voice ragged. "She belongs to us. You